This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UK police heightened security for MPs after the fatal stabbing of lawmaker David Amas. Sudan's political crisis deepens as protesters call for a military coup. French President Emmanuel Macron recognizes the 1961 massacre of Algerian protesters but falls short of a formal apology. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviersa. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, Nigeria's external debt stock set to hit an all-time high of $45 billion. And in sports, Zimbabweans come to terms with their national football team's failure to qualify for next year's World Cup. We begin the hour in the UK, where heightened security measures are being put in place for British lawmakers following the fatal stabbing of Sir David Amas on Friday. Officials are calling his murder a terrorist incident. Amas was holding an open meeting with the constituents in Essex when he was stabbed. The suspect has been arrested in connection with the stabbing. For the latest developments regarding that arrest, we're now joined by Andrew Wilson, who's in London. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Andrew. The killing of MP David Amas has been described as a terrorist incident. What more can you tell us, Sandra, about the suspect who's been arrested?
Well, the terrorism incident, Hannah, is to do with the terms of his arrest. So if you're arrested on a particular suspicion of a particular crime, whether it's murder or any other kind of crime, the detention period police are allowed to keep you is 4 days maximum without charging you. Now, under the Section 41 of the Terrorism Act, you can keep someone suspected of terrorism activity for 14 days without charging. Now, this is partly to do with the lawyers decided they want to go for the heavier charge of something to do concerning terrorism activities rather than criminal activities, but also it's a chance for the police to question this man for a bit longer. He's 25-year-old Ali Harbi Ali. He's a British citizen, but he has what's described as Somali heritage. It's not clear what generation that involves, but certainly that is part of his background. There are stories coming from Whitehall, from the civil service, that Harbi Ali was referred at one point or other some years ago to what's called the PREVENT program, which is an anti-radicalization program in the UK where doctors or police or other public figures can refer individuals to a panel of police officers and social workers to assess if there are any difficulties in their lives or if there's anything in their circumstances that might expose them to the risks of being involved in terrorism activity. Now, it's not thought that Harbi Ali spent very long on this particular exposure to the course, and so that seems to have gone away without incident. Certainly, he was not a known figure or a figure of observation or interest to MI5, the domestic security services. So this does come somewhat out of the blue in terms of the link between Harbi Ali and this arrest under the Terrorism Act. And so police officers from the counter-terrorism unit are spending as much time as they can, making as much use as they can of the remaining time that he remains in custody up till Friday next week. 3 properties in London were being searched. 1 has already been completed. The other 2 are still being searched. But there will be an enormous research effort going on now into the background of this individual to see if they can't piece together more of an explanation as to his connection with this terrible incident at the end of last week.
So, Andrew, what we also know is that this is the second stabbing of an MP in the UK in just 5 years. Back in 2016, Labour MP Joe Cox was also killed in a very similar attack. Andrew, are you hearing of any measures to protect lawmakers from such attacks?
Well, the Joe Cox attack, she was stabbed, but she was also shot as well by an individual who was later arrested and imprisoned and identified as a white supremacist. But the Joe Cox murder did stir an awful lot of anxiety amongst public figures in the UK, particularly politicians, how vulnerable they are, how exposed to the public here they are, and how important a part of their job it is to be exposed to the public. If you're a member of Parliament, you're not a particularly special person. You're just the point person for people to refer to if you want your your grievances or ideas or thoughts about how the country should be run exposed to the discussions in Parliament. So that's your route through your local MP, which means they need to be seen and exposed and available to the public. But since Joe Cox's killing, an awful lot has changed in the personal circumstances of the 650 MPs there are in the UK. MPs talk about getting a lot more harassment online, death threats, abuse, other wicked messages on almost a daily basis in some cases. Most of them in some way or other have upped their personal security, from CCTV to changing the locks. Some MPs say have panic buttons in their offices and also even panic buttons in their bedrooms, some of them. So this is an example of how exposed they feel nowadays to the potential threat of being exposed to or approached by a hostile member of the public. Now, the Home Secretary has said, of course, we're going to look at all this, but this is a cornerstone. This availability of MPs is a cornerstone of British democracy. So it's not going to be easy to prevent them from meeting with their constituents. However, the police will look again, and they have an ongoing operation called Operation Bridger, which was set up after the murder of Joe Cox to look at these issues on a developing basis. So they will look at it again. Right now, I know of at least 3 MP surgeries that have taken place since the killing of Sir David Amess on Friday, and all of them had a police officer present.
Thank you so much for that, Andrew. It's always so good to speak with you. Andrew Wilson speaking to us from London. Let's head over to Haiti now, where 17 American Christian missionaries have been reportedly kidnapped in Haiti. The New York Times reports a gang abducted the group in Port-au-Prince on Saturday as they were on a bus leaving an orphanage and heading towards the airport. Local officials say details are unclear. Violence has gripped the country since the assassination of the president back in July, with a surge in kidnappings this year, often for ransom. Well, in Sudan, hundreds of demonstrators are calling for the military to seize power. This as the country grapples with a deepening political crisis. Pro-military demonstrators gathered in front of the presidential palace in Khartoum on Saturday. Many chanted slogans describing the downfall of the transitional government. Military and civilian groups have been sharing power in Sudan since the toppling of a longtime president, Omar al-Bashir, back in 2019. However, following a failed coup attempt in September, military leaders have been demanding reform to the Forces of Freedom and Change coalition, as well as a civilian cabinet. Civilian leaders have in turn accused the army of aiming to grab power. Pro-civilian groups are now calling for protests to be held later this week.
We came here to bring back the revolution to its initial path, to its motto of peace, freedom, and justice. Sudan is big enough for everyone, without one small group taking advantage over the rest. This is what we came to say. We came to say that this should be the priorities of the new government. We hope that today we have a technocratic government, not a government of establishments or parties.
We are behind the army and behind Burhan. There is no one but the army. The army is what we love, and it's what makes us feel safe. The army is able. They are able to protect the country and to lead it properly. When someone is afraid, they go and hide. But the only place we have to hide is behind these armed forces.
Well, Naba Muhyiddin is in Sudan for us and should join us for the latest from the capital, Khartoum. Naba, thank you so much for speaking to us. More protests are expected later on today. What is the situation there at the moment?
The situation now, more people are coming and joining the protest from other states. They are blocking some roads like the Palace Avenue and some roads around the military headquarters. Till now, the executive body in the government, they didn't say anything. No statement was issued, and the military itself, they didn't say anything about it. But the pro-democracy groups that back the protest against the ousted President Omar al-Bashir, they refuse this protest, and they are calling for protest in the 21st against this protest, because they think this is against the December Revolution goals, because the protesters of today and yesterday, they call for the military to take the power, which is not the constitutional draft. The constitutional draft say the military should hand over the power to the civilians. It's a power sharing agreement, not a military to take over the rule. So there is new protest calling for the military to stick with the constitutional draft and to hand over the power to the civilians. So now the situation is chaotic. Some people call for the military to take it over, and some people are refusing what the protest, today's protest and yesterday's protest calling for.
Thank you so much for all that. Nama Muhyiddin speaking to us from Khartoum in Sudan. Well, joining me now from Rwanda is David Otta Andele. We're staying with that story from Sudan. He is the director for Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us, David. Sudan's traditional government is working within a very tight schedule towards a return to civilian rule. How are the divisions being experienced now likely to affect the country's path to free and fair elections?
I think tremendously, Hannah. I think what we're seeing now is a very strange situation happening in Sudan. I mean, it's very normal to see protesters calling and condemning, a military coup. And we've also seen protesters celebrating military coup. But this is, almost very rare to see protesters calling for the military to take over from the transitional government. So it gives you an indication that the country is being pulled apart. There's a power struggle that will have a tremendous impact on the upcoming election, which of course, according to the transitional government, is expected to be held in 2022. Again, it shows the level of chaos, which has come as a result of the what I call the legacy since the coup d'etat that was organized against longtime President Omar Bashir. Then, the problem now is about consolidation of power by the transitional government. And there is a big struggle, which, no doubt is going to have a tremendous impact on, the upcoming elections, since the country is divided between those who are pro-military regime and those who are pro-democratic regime.
And also, David, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has released a roadmap to end what he described as the country's worst and most dangerous political crisis. David, what do you see as a way out of this impasse?
I think, first of all, the problem is that, the Prime Minister himself is not a neutral party, and he clearly admits that. Sudan now has different problems. One of that is its economic situation since, before and after the overthrow of Omar Bashir. The government is not, being able to consolidate the transitional government, and then that is also putting a lot of strain on the economy. We've seen some protests in the eastern part of Sudan, where the ports leading to South Sudan have been blocked. Causing a lot of chaos in terms of the transportation of crude oil, and trucks have been blocked. So I think, the roadmap now is to be able to, consolidate the two sides, which, one side is supporting a pro-military regime, and the other side is saying that, they want a democratic system of governance. So consolidating both sides would be one of the major issues that needs to be dealt with. But also, making sure that the Bedouin tribes, that occupy the eastern part of the country, are also dealt with in a way that, they would stop advocating for blocking of the economic system. So there's a lot to be done. But, I think, again, it's a battle between those who are in support of a military and those who are in support of democracy.
David, thank you so much for joining us in Africa Live. David Otta Andele, Director for the Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. Well, let's turn to France-Algeria relations. French President Emmanuel Macron has attended a memorial of the 1961 crackdown on Algerian protesters. 60 years ago, dozens of Algerian protesters were killed in Paris under the command of then police chief Maurice Papon. Their bodies were thrown in the Seine River. During the memorial on Saturday, Macron acknowledged the events, calling the massacre an unforgivable crime. This comes at a time when tensions between Algeria and France have been escalating. Earlier this month, the Algerian government recalled its ambassador to Paris. The recall came on the back of a Le Monde article, which reported President Macron as saying that Algerian leaders had rewritten the country's official history based on hatred for France. Meanwhile, Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune is calling for an approach free of what he calls colonialist thought on historical issues. It came in a message marking the 60th anniversary of a deadly Paris police crackdown on Algerians living in that city. Saturday's message characterized the 1961 crackdown as a massacre and crime against humanity. In addition to recalling its ambassador to France, as we mentioned earlier, Algeria has also banned French military planes from its airspace. Algeria's airspace is pivotal in France's fight against terrorism in the Sahel. French troops often fly over Algerian airspace to support ground forces. Let's now take a short break. When we return, more in Africa Live, including Russia records over 1,000 COVID-19 deaths in a single day. And Uganda is considering mandatory coronavirus vaccinations for civil servants.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, China's astronauts are getting to work on board the country's new space station. The Shenzhou 13 crew entered a cargo ship that was launched last month to begin moving in supplies for their mission. The astronauts blasted off early Saturday morning from the Gobi Desert in northwest China. They'll be staying in orbit for 6 months, carrying out experiments and finishing building China's Tiangong space station, which is due to be completed next year. Russia is battling a spike in COVID-19 deaths. The country reported just over 1,000 deaths on Saturday. This is the first time the daily COVID-19 death toll has passed 1,000 since the start of the outbreak. The Russian coronavirus task force says more than 33,000 cases were confirmed in a 24-hour period. 48 million Russians out of 144 million are fully vaccinated, according to the coronavirus task force.
I think that the lockdown we had last year will happen again. There were even less infected people back then, so I am expecting it. Of course, it's frightening.
The number of sick people is more frightening than a lockdown. And they say there are a lot of young people among them, people like us, who are sick, who are seriously sick, having to be on ventilators. That is more scary.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by CGTN correspondent Stuart Smith, who is in Moscow. Hi, Stuart. Thank you for joining us in Africa Live. Stuart, what are authorities in Russia saying is fueling the high COVID numbers being reported?
Yes, well, we heard this morning it's only 997 today, but the bigger picture is clear. Russia is going through its worst wave of infections yet, with more than 1,000, as he said, on Saturday. This is starting to be called a fourth wave, driven mostly by the Delta variant, and the authorities are saying, putting this squarely on people who have not been vaccinated, saying that most people ending up in intensive care in hospital are those who have not been vaccinated. Having said that, when you look at the public health messaging from Russian authorities, for example, you rarely see government ministers or the president himself wearing masks, and the risk of COVID-19 to the public has been consistently downplayed throughout the pandemic. So a lot of people in Russia still do not think this is a big problem.
Well, added to that, even with Russia developing its own vaccine uptake, as you said, has been low. What's causing that?
Yes, only 33% of the population vaccinated, despite the fact that Russia was the first country in the world to register a COVID-19 vaccine. It's been available for nearly a year now. It's effective, it's safe, but people do not want to take it. And when you look at polling as to the reasons why, there are a few recurring themes. One of them is that people simply are not worried about COVID-19. More people in Russia are worried about the vaccine than they are about the virus, despite what's going on at the moment and has gone on throughout the pandemic. The other reason is that a lot of people in Russia do not trust the motivations of authorities asking them to get the vaccine. And another is that Russia's homemade vaccines, 4 of which are approved in Russia, as well as Sputnik V, people do not believe that this was tested thoroughly and it was a rushed vaccine.
Stuart, some people in Russia are concerned about a possible lockdown, but earlier the government had ruled out that it would have a lockdown. What other measures is the Kremlin looking at?
Yes, it's been a repeated refrain from the Kremlin. Another national lockdown will not take place, but what the Kremlin has done is said to regional authorities, 85 regions in Russia, they have a lot of autonomy as to how they run their health systems and what laws they implement. The Kremlin is saying regions should take their own action to decide what to do. Some examples of the kind of action some regions are taking in the midst of this 4th wave: there are QR code requirements for entry to a lot of businesses. People have to prove they're vaccinated using QR codes. Masks on public transport and inside buildings have not gone away since the pandemic first entered Russia, but we are now seeing the reintroduction of rules about how many employees can be in offices physically on the premises. Some people are being asked or being required to return and work from home. And we're also seeing requirements for employers to have a certain number of vaccinated employees. Again, this vaccination issue, seemingly the big focus of the Kremlin and the regions. Getting that figure up is seen as the only way to increase Russia's defense against COVID-19.
Stuart, thank you so much for all that. Stuart Smith speaking to us from Moscow. Well, Uganda is considering making it mandatory for all public servants to be vaccinated. Some public institutions have already instructed their employees to take the shot and to also carry a certificate of proof of vaccination to work. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga tells us more.
A campaign to boost vaccination in Uganda. Public health institutions are pushing for compulsory vaccination.
It is only right that we lead by example, and that is why we have requested all our employees to present proof of vaccination with immediate effect, and all visitors coming to NMS premises starting on Monday the 18th.
The move is already driving many people to vaccination centers to take the jab.
And the fact that those who are not vaccinated would be limited to some stuff, like maybe go shopping, you have to show your vaccination card. So I really saw it as a necessity for me to get it.
But rights activists say the institutions should first sensitize their employees about the benefits of taking the jab.
What government needs to do is to offer clear information as to why and what are the benefits of people being vaccinated, not pushing them to be vaccinated by force. That still will not make it, because you're going to find very many people who are going to keep away.
Uganda has so far received about 8 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine. More than 2.4 million people have been vaccinated so far. At least 500,000 have received their second dose. The government says it requires 4.8 million people to be vaccinated before a full reopening of the economy takes place. And with mandatory vaccination, health providers believe they can achieve this target. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Meanwhile, over in Egypt, the High Committee for Managing the COVID-19 outbreak is proceeding with a plan to vaccinate children aged between 12 and 18. It has approved the administering of 2 vaccines, including China's Sinovac, on children. The country is expected to begin inoculation of children within 2 months. Adol Imroki has that report.
This week, more than 27 million children returned to public schools in Egypt. It's the first time schools are fully operational since the COVID-19 pandemic started. Due to fears that schools could lead to more coronavirus infections, the government says it's working on a plan to vaccinate children above 12.
Last year, we didn't worry about children and thought they wouldn't face risks. But when the Delta strain emerged, it clearly infected children and youth. That brought attention to children and COVID-19 vaccination, because even if they are not infected, they could be silent carriers of the virus.
The number of children aged 12 to 18 in the population is very big. We started vaccinating people over 18 years. Adding a younger age category greatly helps in protecting the nation from COVID-19 infections. Vaccinations will decrease infections and mortality rates. It has been challenging to make adults abide by personal preventive measures, and it's even more difficult for children. That's why vaccinating children is very important.
The government has not officially announced the vaccines it will use to inoculate children. Experts are saying China's Sinovac, which Egypt is producing domestically, and Pfizer top the list. However, because of the shortage ease and the traditional technology it uses, some pediatricians prefer the Chinese jab.
We should rely on Sinovac because we have the power to produce it, which we have self-sufficiency of. There are several countries that use it already for children. Abu Dhabi in UAE used Sinovac. China was the first world power to use it on children, which gives us confidence using it. That will make us the third country in the world to use the jab on children.
Sinovac is an inactivated virus vaccine, which is the foundation technology for most vaccines. Therefore, we tend to be more comfortable administering it. The whole reason we do 3 stages of research is to study the efficacy of the vaccine and monitor any unexpected side effects. It is very important to use it for that age category, and soon it will be available for younger children.
China approved Sinovac's CoronaVac for children over 3 in June. South Africa began phase 3 clinical trials in September for children 6 months and older. Egyptian studies on vaccinating children have been conducted. This week, the government is expected to announce the official plan for vaccinating children 12 to 18 years old. Already 240 vaccination centers across the country have been dedicated to inoculate students. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
We head over to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where scuffles between supporters of the president and an opposition leader broke out in the capital. The confrontation between the two groups came after 6 religious groups proposed Denis Kadima to be the new head of the Electoral Commission. The religious groups are mandated by the Constitution to nominate the leadership of the election body by consensus. Protesters, however, say that the process to select the leadership of the electoral body was influenced by politicians. With that report, here's Notula Shabalala.
A proposal by 6 religious groups to have Denis Kadima nominated to lead the Independent National Electoral Commission has angered opposition supporters in the DRC. Thousands of supporters of opposition leader Martin Fayulu marched through the streets of Kinshasa. They are calling for a neutral body to oversee the country's elections in 2023.
The message is clear. Mr. Tshisekedi must make a choice between a political Seni and Article 64 of the Constitution. Too much is too much. The evil is deep, and we will no longer tolerate the intolerable. Mr. Tshisekedi must leave Seni free in the end.
We don't want a politicized Seni. Felix Tshisekedi wants to impose his collaborators on the Seni to facilitate his task in the elections. We say no and no, especially to the shift in 2023. We don't want them to give us reasons like COVID-19 in 2023 to not organize the elections.
Political analysts and diplomats have criticized the poll body for its role in the disputed vote in 2018. Amid widespread accusations of fraud, the Electoral Commission declared Felix Tshisekedi the winner. Fayulu was among the leaders of the protest on Saturday.
We need an independent and transparent Seni, a Seni that will do its work well during the electoral period, a president of Seni that will publish the real results.
Police fired tear gas to disperse the crowds, but the demonstrators marched on. The opposition has threatened to hold more demonstrations.
I ask you to prepare yourself. If the President of the National Assembly wants to convene the plenary for the vote of the President of the Seni, we are going to go to the palace of the people. I ask the policemen that these days they must not prevent us. Therefore, prepare yourself.
Tshisekedi is expected to seek a second term when Congolese voters return to the polls in 2 years' time, with the electoral body Seni likely to play a pivotal role again. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
As the world continues to observe in matters pertaining to World Food Day this weekend, nutrition specialists in Zambia say that food security and diversity can be improved in Africa. This, they say, could promote and sustain healthy diets for the people on the continent. According to one research study done by the International Federation of the Red Cross, over 100 million Africans are facing crisis, emergency, or catastrophic levels of food insecurity. The COVID-19 outbreak and containment measures have been attributed to these figures, particularly for those living in poverty. CGTN spoke with Matthew Mukuru, the coordinator for the Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition Alliance in Zambia. Here's what he had to say.
There's a lot that Zambia and other countries can learn from China's achievement. So if you look at China's achievement, you'd be talking about food diversity. You'd be talking about just investment in food and different types of food that meet dietary needs of the people in country, as well as also some of the food that we are also getting in different parts of the world. So if you look at Zambia, for example, you would realize that you have a lot of Chinese restaurants that sell diverse food. So, and you look at the nutritional value of some of this food that we are getting from the restaurants and other stores that are selling, the Chinese food, you would realize that there's a lot that we can do, and we actually need to do as China has done.
The day's business news coming up after the show break, including Nigeria's external debt stock set to hit an all-time high of $45 billion.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for the business news. We head over to Nigeria, where that country's external debt stock is set to hit an all-time high of $45 billion. This comes as the government's request to Parliament to approve fresh financing to fund its budget deficit. As CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports, authorities in Africa's topmost economy are seeking legislators' approval of fresh external borrowing to the tune of $5 billion.
A total of nearly $5 billion in foreign loans. That's what Nigeria's government is seeking to borrow from the World Bank, French Development Agency, and Exim Bank. President Muhammadu Buhari's request comes barely 2 months after Parliament approved an earlier request to borrow $8.3 billion and 490 million euros in loans. He says the funds are part of an initial borrowing plan for the 2018 to 2020 budget.
I personally think it is completely irresponsible to borrow for recurrent expenditure or to borrow for consumption, to borrow to fund the budget. When you look at the structure of the Nigerian budget, you will find out that in the 2020 budget, this current budget, the Nigerian government is using about 90% of its revenues, inflows, to what? To service loans. So it is actually a very negative and unproductive trajectory that the administration is leaning toward.
Nigeria is facing one of its toughest times after barely climbing out of a recession, its second in less than 5 years. The World Bank says the West African nation's revenue to GDP ratio fell to about 6% last year, making it the lowest in the world. Its revenue has seen 37% decline over the past 6 years and has been worsened by the pandemic-led downturn.
Nobody borrows against GDP. You actually borrow against your revenues. We're focusing more on spending, than creating, generating revenue. Nigeria is not generating as much revenue. And how do we generate revenue? That should be the conversation.
Nigeria's external debt profile has increased rapidly by 366% since 2015. The nation's total outstanding foreign debt was $9.7 billion before Buhari assumed office. By the end of March, the Debt Management Office posted an official foreign debt of $32.9 billion. If the latest request is approved, foreign borrowings in 2021 alone will total nearly $13 billion.
There's nothing wrong with borrowing, okay? If we're building factories, if we're building human capacity, if we're building the hospitals, if we're building the educational system. We now have this huge cost of governance. Fund management is a problem because we spend, so much to maintain, the government, the people in government and the institutions.
Some experts warn that Nigeria's rising debt could scare away prospective foreign investors from the country if not checked.
This huge debt profile creates investor pessimism. And investor pessimism, it reduces the amount of foreign direct inflows that you have. And once you have all those uncertainties within the Nigerian economy, the Naira is unstable.
Government says the loans are meant for projects to help the nation realize its economic sustainability plan with focus across key sectors such as infrastructure, health, agriculture and food security, energy and COVID-19. Experts advise government to concentrate on its diversification agenda and build infrastructures to boost revenue and reduce borrowing. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Over in East Africa, blockchain-based community currency is providing a lifeline for hundreds of Kenyans in low-income neighborhoods as they battle through the coronavirus economic downturn. Chain Analysis Global Crypto Adoption Index 2021 has ranked Kenya the top country in the world in terms of peer-to-peer crypto trade, well ahead of the other 154 countries surveyed.
Kenya's capital, Nairobi, is sometimes described as a paradox with two diametrically opposite extremes. On the one hand, it's home to chic, upwardly mobile communities. On the other, some of those chic communities are sandwiched by some of the world's largest urban slums. Home to over 80,000 people, Mukuru Kayaba is one of the more populated slums in the Kenyan capital. In this low-income neighborhood, there's a new digital currency that's helping households stay afloat amid the COVID-19 crisis. It's called Sarafu, and the blockchain-based digital currency was created by non-profit organization Grassroots Economics in conjunction with the Kenya Red Cross.
What we found, especially in the informal settlements, that people who are daily wage earners, with the COVID restrictions, with lockdown, etc., they weren't earning their regular daily income that they were previously earning. And so their ability to access daily goods and services or to buy them really decreased. So community currency comes in to support that aspect.
There are currently about 100 businesses in the Mukuru Kayaba area that accept the community currency. Teresia's beauty salon is one of them and now takes us through how she uses the digital token.
I type *384*96, then OK. I'm going to be sending 1,700 Sarafu coins to this phone number. There you have it.
In 2020, Kenya surprised many by ranking first in peer-to-peer cryptocurrency trading. It ranked ahead of second place Venezuela and third place Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, with 4 times Kenya's population. The increasing interest in digital tokens among Kenyans comes as the country's currency, the shilling, continues to weaken against major currencies.
The way you need to look at regulation is to break it down into good subsets. It's a type of users or market players that the regulation is affecting. So like first, I think most people are interested in retail. And retail is your standard peer-to-peer markets or exchanges. And as we saw in Nigeria, when the central banks technically banned Bitcoin, peer-to-peer markets went up 27% within a month. So they don't really care about the regulation. but that's where the users were moved away from exchanges towards them.
Authorities here, particularly the Central Bank of Kenya, have also been slow to adopt the use of cryptocurrencies, with unending discussions on developing regulations. This, however, does not seem to be stopping Kenya's growing appetite for cryptocurrencies. Najma Abdirizak, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, Africa, with its internationally recognized musical talent and growing mobile phone use, it's central to Swedish music streamer Spotify's plans to extend its reach to 1 billion customers. The efforts to collaborate with telecommunication companies are set to boost revenue and help increase essential subscribers to the music platform.
As African artists are streamed across the world, the continent was seen as an obvious choice and is home to more than a third of Spotify's 85 new markets. The problem is payment on a continent where many people are more likely to have a mobile phone than a bank account.
One of the things that we did when we moved into Kenya was just to make sure that we were able to secure alternative payment methods. Some parts of Africa, a lot of African countries are unbanked, so that means they don't use credit cards. And this is very true of a lot of East Africa. In Kenya, you use M-Pesa for the most part. So we ensured to make sure that there was that facility so that the fans don't have so many barriers to access to music, which is something we should all be able to enjoy.
Most of us have access to our phones, but not most of us have cards and not most of us have bank accounts. So it's just important, since our phones are always with us, it's important to just make it easy for us to pay through our phones.
Owned by Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom's M-Pesa is used to send money, save, borrow, and make payments for goods and services. Elsewhere in Africa, Spotify is seeking other collaborators.
I chose M-Pesa because it just goes direct, and then it won't cut. I have to put my PIN, so I have to, let's say, I have to authorize it. Yeah, because when you use M-Pesa, you have to give the authority for your money to be used, So it's better like that. And it's cheaper when you use M-Pesa also.
Music producer Charles Otieno says the streaming platform is helping artists like him to monitor streaming numbers and to see who's listening to their music.
On Spotify, we have Spotify for Artists. So we were not even able to access the Spotify for Artists because it wasn't in Kenya. So when it came to Kenya, now we can access Spotify for Artists. You can see the logs. You can see how your music is basically growing.
Spotify's local rivals, such as Kenya-based and Danish-listed Mdundo and Nigeria-headquartered Boomplay, have also started to build ties with mobile operators.
Spotify is continuing to ensure that we are having the right conversations with the right partners to ensure that we are providing solutions to payment problems that several African consumers face in different parts of the continent.
Such partnerships are based on telecom providers selling music bundles that give customers access to a streaming company's premium service and exclusively curated music mixes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Time for a short break. More on Africa Live when we return.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Ethiopia held a mud and clay festival where children and their parents converged to play with mud. It is targeted at strengthening the family bond as well as bringing back a culture that is fast fading with modernity. CGTN's Gletuan Johi reports from Addis Ababa.
The rainy season is over, and this bright sunny day is a great chance for children, excited to get their hands dirty. This is fun. The event is called Nu Chika Enabuka, which in Amharic means, come let's play with mud and clay. For many parents, it has brought back cherished childhood memories.
I used to play when I was a kid, so there is nothing such kind of event in here before, so my girl enjoys that. So that's why I bring her here.
As we grow up, we were accustomed with this muddy stuff.
but because of this new generation, they don't have any chance to play with the mud on any other stuff. So that's why I decided to bring them to the Mescal Square to enjoy this stuff.
For others, it is a time to spend less than $5 to give their children a near to normal life under the pandemic.
Since you know about the COVID stuff and everything going on, children have been staying at their house. They weren't enjoying. So they will release their stress.
The event, held in the middle of the city, is the first of its kind. The organizers say they plan to make it frequent, even in other towns in the country.
It's really therapeutic, right? When you make something with the clay, it gives you good inspiration. So we want to present for new generation, you know. As you know, this urbanization, so children are kind of far from clay, natural things. So we want to create that bond.
When children are like experiencing this world, and when they do like create their own playground, that's how they create like their creativity, and also that's how they build their social skills, and that's how like they create the attachment to the entire world.
The organizers are trying to promote national unification. Apart from playing with just mud and clay, the organizers are encouraging the children to create what they call a pen pal system. For example, children here in Addis Ababa will be encouraged to write letters to other children in other parts of the country. And that way, they should be able to connect and create a big ring of unity. And as these small hands get dirty today, they look forward to many more such fun events. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's bring you the sports news after the short break, including Zimbabwe supporters come to terms with failure to qualify for next year's World Cup.